mean, Mr. Dimmermuth, thank you for going to Alaska. I appreciate it a great deal. I further appreciate the fact that instead of just going to Anchorage and Fairbanks, you went to the village of Cake, where a small island community, they've got a VPSO, but they didn't have one for a while. It's pretty small law enforcement, as you know. Recruitment and retention is difficult. You went to Tanana, a river community not connected by road. You had an opportunity to be in Sitka, another islanded community, and as you point out, you're up in Kotzebue, where you felt the pain of the community still following the death of 10-year-old Ashley Johnson Barr. I think that's a good preview of some of the challenges that we face with law enforcement and why this is so important. I understand further that you were at the consultation there in Fairbanks, which was very key. I'm sure you heard a lot of the pent-up frustration. I'd like to think that that is now going to translate itself into additional action. I thank my colleague, Senator Udall, for bringing up the set-aside monies and again, the push to ensure that all those funds get out the door, and if they have not gotten out the door, that there's an opportunity for second round. So I think that that is important. I have a letter here from Central Counsel Plinkett and Haida that I will ask to be submitted for the record, Mr. Chairman. But it outlines many of the same concerns that you have probably heard from those up in the interior. One of the issues that I heard raised was that DOJ has a pretty strict policy of not allowing applicants to cure technical defects in their applications and of not providing technical assistance when preparing an application. You've just indicated in a previous answer that some of the problems with getting the money out the door was, you said that the tribes don't have the infrastructure in place to manage, and they don't have that capacity. We have to help them build that capacity. And this is the problem, and why it was why I think it concerns so many of us that these were going to go out by way of competitive grants, because so many of these tribes are so small, they do not have professional staff, they don't have any staff. It is them who are trying to wade through this morass. So you've got to help us with this capacity issue, and I would hope that you're now taking a different view in how you feel you can assist the tribes in being successful with their applications, rather than just rejecting them if they have not been fully resourced, I guess. Is that something that you are doing in terms of trying to be helpful and build that capacity?
Absolutely. We set aside a significant amount for the financial management centers to help with financial capacity, because it's one thing to get the application in, but they have to be able to use those otherwise.
Right. Can I stop you there, though? I would so much rather us not put money into financial capacity centers. I would rather get that money out the door to the tribe, to the community, to provide for the resources there. I hear what you're saying, but I want you to be cautious when you're saying, you know, we're putting a lot of money over here. We need to get that money down on the ground. Agree?
Absolutely, but if we get the money down on the ground and they misspend it, either because they don't understand what to do or by mismanaging it, then they end up on a high-risk list and their funds get frozen and they end up in a worse position long-term. So we want to set them up for success long-term, because they definitely need these resources. I certainly saw that. And if you have ideas on how we can best set them up for success.
Well, I do think that we have some ideas that we would like to share with you, because we've grown a lot of capacity in recent years, and how we can share that, I think, is important. I'm going to have a couple more questions for the record that I will submit here. They're very important. But one of the things that concerns me is that DOJ maintains that these tribal set-aside funds can only be used for activities that directly support victims of crime, not for prevention or for law enforcement, for prosecution or other criminal justice programs or purposes. And I think our challenge, our problem, our struggle is that if we don't have a responsive criminal justice system in the first place, it's tough to then be there to help a victim. And again, I think you saw that in the communities that you went to. When you don't have a state trooper, when you don't have any law enforcement presence to speak of, when the only time the law comes is when there has been a tragedy, when you're a community like Huna and there's been a murder and the body of that young woman needs to be literally taped off in the door of the church there, and village members taking turns to do a watch over her body until hours and days until the troopers can come so that they can preserve evidence. We've got a base infrastructure problem. So I need to know that there is some way that there is flexibility for us in ensuring that there are resources that can be made available to help the victims, but to help the victims in the first place by making sure that we have a responsive criminal justice system. And you saw for yourself that we don't in far too many places. So whether it's through the VOCA funding and the set aside, there's got to be something that we can do on the prevention side, on the law enforcement side. And I know that this is not just Alaska specific. I know that in far too many of the reservations, you don't have those that are providing for that level of safety. So, you know, the victim is saying, okay, well, I'll get victim compensation funds, but wouldn't it be best to keep her not being a victim in the first place?
Absolutely. As a former prosecutor, it's you need the public to be confident that if they report a crime, it'll be investigated, it'll be prosecuted, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's challenges from reporting all the way to victim services at the end. And so that's one of the questions I asked about the VOCA funding. Why can't we do more prevention, more law enforcement? And that's simply a statutory restriction from when
so that is something that we need to address here.
Well, it's a long-standing, when the Crime Victims Fund was set up, they wanted it to only go to victim services. And that's why it's statutorily, it can't be used for law enforcement or prosecution. So that's not the department's restrictions, that's statutory. And there's pros and cons with dipping into that, which we won't go into now. But what we can do is we have other funding sources through the JAG program. Those resources can be used to help tribal law enforcement. And we have the other CTAS purpose areas, so we're investing a lot in tribal courts to give the tribes some greater local authority to handle some of the public safety challenges. And so I agree, it's the whole system, there's challenges. And I went to Selawik for an afternoon and spent time with the trooper there, and he said when he got there, usually when the trooper shows up to a community, the crime goes up because people are confident in reporting it. And then it goes down because they know there's somebody there who will respond. And so absolutely having a law enforcement presence in communities is vital. And I didn't know before going to Alaska that, you know, there are no roads.
82% of the
Right.
communities in the state of Alaska not connected by a road.
So, you know, the nearest officer's 2 hours away by flight if there's a pilot,
If there's good
there's
weather.
a plane, if the weather cooperates. And so it's hard for victims to trust that system sometime to report. And if they don't report, they probably aren't going to ask for services or compensation. And so, yes, it's a system-wide issue that, you know, we're going to have to address as best we can.
Well, Mr. Dimmermuth, it sounds like you got a sense, a flavor for the situation and the challenges that we deal with. I'd like to visit with you to perhaps learn more about your impressions and perhaps some of your takeaways and your ideas so we can help you on the administration side working legislatively. But we've got this VOCA set aside. We need to make sure that it works. I hope that you take these suggestions from these letters that I have introduced and Senator Udall has introduced, and we can address some of that. But I'll look forward to our conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.